Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
Bucs in the Basement. Belly on up to the 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. My name's Chris. His name's Craig. He's pumped up because the Pirates got mentioned on MLB Network. He gets really fired up whenever they're nationally mentioned. He's like, oh my God, they're talking about our team. He's so excited about it.
I was really excited. Like we talked about before we hopped on the show here, Chris, like some of this stuff is inaccurate. And so like, obviously people will run with the inaccuracies, but the overall message of what was discussed is pretty much spot on to what we've been talking about on the show for, God, it seems like forever now, but especially during the last few shows, is that if the Pirates are going to, take that step forward, make some noise, the big caveat is that they're going to have to spend in the offseason. We've talked about pitchforks and torches, at PNC Park 115 Federal, if that doesn't happen during this offseason. Because, you're getting all these young guys up now. You're trying to see who fits, who doesn't. Andy Rodriguez is your full-time catcher now, so people can't complain about that anymore. Of course, they'll complain about Jason DeLay being the backup instead of Henry Davis. But as was stated on MLB Network, Jason DeLay is actually a really good defensive catcher. Mitch Keller likes having him as a personal catcher. And if you're complaining about a guy who has less than 175 official plate appearances in a Major League Baseball season, that's not really one of your biggest problems. But basically, Chris, got to add two arms, got to add a first baseman, and try to make that push forward. And hopefully some guys take some steps forward, because what we've seen this year, Brian Reynolds struggling a little bit, Cabrian Hayes struggling, injured. And then, Jack Suwinski, who is possibly the most polarizing player that the Pirates may have ever had, just because he is one of those three true outcome guys. He either strikes out, he walks, or he homers. And if he's not hitting homers right now, he's not doing much of anything.
There's so much there. There's so much to unpack. We gotta get to all of it in 30 minutes here. So why don't we start with the MLB Network thing? Okay, because when I get to Suwinski, I've got some hard truths for everybody, and why I think you don't just give up on the guy, but you have to understand exactly what he is. But what was it? I think it was Dan O'Dowd. I want to believe he was. I want to say he was a general manager of the Mets for years. There are times when he goes on MLB Network and he says things that make me think that he's never watched the team that he's talking about in his life. And then there are times when he says something, I go, yeah, he at least understands what's going on with that team. But I think sometimes the MLB Network guys and a lot of national people have a hard time really understanding what's going on with the franchise, because they're trying to keep track of so many of them and who really pays attention to the bad franchises when they're bad, right? So not a lot of people are going to know the most about the Pittsburgh Pirates after the last couple of years. Most of them are going to be out of town stupid. That said, he was talking about things they need to address in the offseason. He said, look, they're going to be one of the most surprising teams in baseball in 2024 if they go and they spend money or they improve on the team. And that's something we've been saying now for a while. This is a team that has a core. This is a team in which some of the young players are still going to be developing in 24 and 25 and 26. But the good news is now you've built the base. You can be competitive and your window can open, and it could stay open for a while if you're willing to make a couple of moves, maybe move a player or two that would be valuable to another team to get a position that you covet. We've talked about the fact that you are deep at certain positions going into your minors, from your major league roster down to your minors. Not every prospect's going to pan out, and you only have 9 spots on the field. So if you have a position of need, it may be time to deal from a position of depth, and then it's time to also spend some money. I don't expect them to be in the top 10 payroll next year, but I don't expect them, they shouldn't be in the bottom 5. They shouldn't be in the bottom 10. They should be sitting somewhere in that middle range, and now is the time that you get the reward for the pain over the last couple of years. And first base is the first position I look at. They don't have an answer there. And rather than piecemeal it together, they should look at what's available in free agency. And that was one of the points that was being made on MLB Network. And there's some options. Like, look, Joey Votto's got a club option. Joey Votto's old. And if you go out and you get Joey Votto, he may be a great leader for young guys. He's an awesome dude. I actually, like, every time I see a clip of him, I'm like, man, this guy's funny. He's interesting. He's a good ball player. He's a gamer. But if he wants to play baseball, trust me, he's just going to stay where he's at. And if he goes someplace else, I don't think he's going to Pittsburgh. And you're getting him on the decline. So I'm not really excited about that name when I look at it. You could talk about the possibility of Josh Bell opting out and he comes back to Pittsburgh. But you have to also ask, is that what you want there? Is that good enough for you? I don't want anything to do with CJ Cron. That guy is good only in Denver. When the Rockies are playing home games, he's a baller. When he plays someplace else, I couldn't believe that the Angels picked him up. And you understand why the Angels are falling apart since the trade deadline, because they are one of the dumbest franchises in baseball. How are they the only people who didn't understand that the only time that guy hits is when he's in the thin mountain air? The guy I'm looking at is Hoskins from Philadelphia. All right? He's about 30 years old. He's not a bad player at all. He would be an improvement over at first base. He would be stability over at first base. His OPS this year is nearing 800. He's had years where he's done better than that. He's not going to become something bigger than what he is, but what he is should be perfectly fine to sit over at first base for, let's say, the next 3 to 4 years. That's a guy you go out and target, you pay money, and you bring him in and you put him in your lineup, and he's been on a team that knows how to win. And he's been around players that know how to be ball players in a professional MLB locker room. And he can hold down that position and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Does anybody else stand out there? What do you think about that?
No, Chris. I mean, it's a fairly thin market. And what, like, the first baseman, a lot of times the free agents kind of come down to is, guys that, kind of like a Carlos Santana or, maybe like a G-Man Choi. They are guys that, have performed fairly well, are, not super expensive, but most of the times it's going to be like those, 1-year prove it deals. I think we kind of have to get beyond that at these positions because we've talked about this before. We haven't been able to develop anybody at first base. I mean, I think that Ben Cherington in his mind wanted to see what a Malcolm Nunez could do in Indianapolis this past, and during the season. But unfortunately, he's been injured for most of the year. But I see, like, all over, social media now, he had like one, giant great week. But I mean, you can't go into that as, your answer for next year. You're going to have to get a veteran player. And just because you would sign, like, say you sign Rhys Hoskins for like 3 to 4 years, and let's say Malcolm Nunez, turns out to be something, that's another guy that you could possibly move, either move Nunez or move Hoskins. Probably move.
And never forget that there's such a thing as a DH now. I think that there are still Pirates fans that think they're in the National League. You can be overloaded with hitters and move one of them into the DH spot. And then with that DH spot, you also, when there's days off and guys need regular rest, you create another batting position in your lineup. So it's not like you can only have 8 hitters. You actually can have 10 because you got the DH and you're going to have days off. And if you put your roster together properly, you can be overloaded at a position and still find a place for a guy to get enough at bats to help your team, if he starts to come along. You're not blocking anybody by going out and getting a first baseman. The only way you're really blocking him is you go out and get a guy who could be a roadblock because he's at the end of his career and he's going to frustrate you. You know, I mean, and there's not a lot of depth at first base. That's why when I look at Hoskins, I say, you have the money. If that guy's an unrestricted free agent, he's your number one target.
Yeah, and Chris, I mean, this kind of goes back to something we were talking about last week, which is kind of like keeps on being brought up just because, I mean, Kutch is only a DH. Kutch can only DH. And I don't know, like, unless he's like coming back and he's taking a pay cut and he realizes he's maybe only going to hit, 1 to 2 times a week. But if you are thinking about getting a Hoskins, you're thinking about, platooning Joe and Suwinski. You're running out of spots because at some point in time that would move Henry Davis into the DH at times. I mean, if you want to have a completely open spot, I don't see how you can have a guy who's at the tail end of his career, who's not really a power hitter, who has fallen off towards the second half of the season, and have him as penned in as your DH, going into 2024, if you're, looking to compete. It's still a roster spot. I mean, not that, there's a ton of guys beating down the door to get on the 26-man active roster. But if you're talking about bringing in somebody and then also having, you know, other people flowing into that position, it just kind of like Kutch, to me, like it's starting to make less and less sense for 2024. I'm not completely overreacting to that, but I don't know. It just is to me. That's kind of where I'm at today. If that's the
And
session we
then,
made.
no, I understand that. And then the other thing that you have to look at is starting pitching. And where it is shallow, this is a very shallow free agent class at a lot of positions. Starting pitching should be something you should be able to acquire, and you have the money. You should be able to, with this low payroll, go out and actually spend and get a starting pitcher. You don't need to go bargain basement shopping. You can kind of shop. Like, I think a guy to be really interesting to go out and kick the tires on and bring in, because I've seen flashes in the last couple of weeks with him, mainly because of all my fantasy baseball play, right? Like, this is how you learn about guys. And you see if a guy's like doing something all of a sudden that they're going back to their norm. Jack Flaherty is somebody that I think is, coming off of his injury, slowly figuring it back out again, who's going to go out there and may not be a huge price tag. You might be able to also spend, though, for a guy like a Lucas Giolito, who's not going to be one of the top options out there, but is a guy that definitely is a top-end rotation piece. I've always liked Jordan Montgomery. I think Kenta Maeda, if you look at him in the last couple of months for the Twins, has figured it out again. He's back, and he's going to be a free agent out there. I mean, sure, we can all dream of bringing in Shohei, right? We can always say it's Shohei or bust for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And wouldn't that be amazing? Bob Nutting pulls up with a truck full of money and says, all these years that I've been cheap is just so I can give Shohei Ohtani $600 million. And Pirates fans rejoice and they build a statue for him. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's something that's there. I mean, there's always the Aaron Nolas of the world. Blake Snell is an interesting option. There's guys out there that you could say. I'm trying to think of like what they would pay for, but you definitely need two. And you can you get two of them. One of them is going to be that guy that you identify as he's got a few years left, and we've seen positives this year. And the other one should be an established frontline, expensive starting pitcher. Because when your payroll is what it is right now, you really can hand somebody $18 million a year. And it shouldn't even be a bump in the road if you intend to compete.
Yeah, because I mean, we've always gone out and signed two pitchers, but it's been of the level of, this guy, we're going to see if we can help him just extend his career a little bit and flip him at the deadline in a, Tyler Anderson, a Jose Quintana, especially like in a Rich Hill. And then you get like a wild card. This year it was Vince Velasquez. Unfortunately, he was injured and, weren't able to do much with him. But yeah, one of them, Chris, and we even said this last offseason, is we'd like to see them take a step forward and put down some money to bring a guy in for more than just that
On the
one
right
year.
guys.
On the right guys.
On the right guys, too. That's the thing. There's going to be a lot of guys out there that are pitchers that over the last year or so have started putting more guys on base and are starting to age out. It's got to be on the right guys. Professional scouting, pro scouting, looking at other teams is going to be so important this offseason, not only for free agent signings, but for trades. And this is where you're going to find out, is the structure within the front office correct? Has it been built properly? Is the core of your team in the right place? Because if you go out and spend, it doesn't mean that it's going to work unless you identify the right guys. They should be buying a $20 million pitcher this year. They really should be. They should be buying a $20 million pitcher and a $10 million first baseman, and then going out and finding a $15 million pitcher, and they should be adding that payroll. And then it's not that when you look at what their payroll numbers are, that is a drop in the bucket. I don't care how small market you are. This team should be able to afford that. This team should at least be able to move that payroll up that much with all these other guys under contract. And so, like, this is something that I'm expecting them to do, and if they don't do it, you get to start yelling about it. In previous years, have you ever heard me say, go spend money? No! I've always said it doesn't matter because you need to build a team. Well, now you have one, right? Now you have one. Not only should you be building the team in the offseason, but then when you go in the next year, you should be evaluating guys that maybe you planned on that aren't working out for you. Like if Ke'Bryan Hayes continues to be what Ke'Bryan Hayes is at this point, with the fact that the back end of his contract isn't worth as much yearly as the front end of his contract, if he goes out next year and you go for it and you find him to be the weak link all of a sudden, and you see something better in 2025 in the free agent class, then that's the next move you make. You see? It's time to become like a big boy team again. That's what I want from this team.
If you ever see me out and about in Pittsburgh, you will always recognize me, and not just because of the white beard, but also because the Y that is always on top of my head, the hat I always wear. The Yins brand, proud partners with Bucs in the Basement. 3 dynasties, 1 brand, Yins. Finally, 1 brand to rep all black and gold. Follow at Shop Yins for new merch drops and giveaways. Order online at www.shopyins, the emphasis on the 2 Z's, high quality comfort, lightweight materials, a new modern look for the black and gold, made for Yins by a Yinzer.
The Jack Suwinski thing is so interesting to me because you look at what's going on with him, Craig. He's a platoon player, isn't he?
That's exactly what
and
it is.
that's not a total loss, but that's what it feels like he is. He's an all or nothing platoon player. He's fine if he's batting in the 7, 8, or 9 spot on your team and you don't rely on him because you built the rest of the lineup. You're going to have guys on there. There's going to be a team that's going to win the World Series this year that's going to have a guy just like Jack Suwinski on their team. The difference is going to be that they're not depending on him. Okay? And that's because they go out and they spend and they made the right moves and they built a better team. And yeah, this guy came along and there's some Jack Suwinski fans in the stands, and you know you like him because he came up through your system. But deep down in the end, he's not the linchpin, and he can't be the linchpin. There's still a place for him on the team, but that's what you're learning right now, and that's another reason why you go out and spend is Jack Suwinski.
Yeah, and he's like a very streaky player, and what we've seen is that, I mean, he's, since I believe it was like June 1st, he's not hitting very well. In August, he's not hitting at all. I mean, he still has a WAR that, you know, if you take the B WAR and the F WAR, it's still right around like a 2 WAR player. So he is like a regular starter, but it seems that because of Brian Reynolds and Ke'Bryan Hayes not providing exactly what you needed this season, or maybe what you expected from them. I mean, Brian Reynolds dealing with a back injury, Ke'Bryan Hayes dealing with a back injury, and, you know, Brian Reynolds finally coming around here to the point where he has has overtaken Jack Suwinski as far as WAR, has taken Jack Suwinski as far as OPS, and kind of seems to be back a little bit. Brian Hayes, he's on one of his hot streaks again. He's done away with the toe tap. He's gone back to the leg kick. To me, I don't care if he toe taps, leg kicks. I mean, I was watching the game the other day, and I don't know if it was Rock, John Wayner, or if it was Joe Block. I can't remember exactly who it was just talking about like his bat getting through the zone faster. So to me, I don't care if he leg kicks or toe taps. Brian Hayes, the big thing for him is that he uses his entire upper body to turn on the ball, get his bat head out in front, and actually hit the ball instead of sitting back trying to do it all with his arms, and does that inside outside swing, which still makes good hard contact, but it doesn't produce for him. It just never has. So that's where like Jack Suwinski, I feel like he's getting so much of this is because it's almost like because everybody else was down, everybody looks at his home runs. He does have, the 21 home runs this year, and thinks
20 of them from the right, 20 of them from 20 of them versus right-handed pitching and one against left-handed pitching because of the way that he sets up. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And I think it's across the board. Like in his career, I think he only has like 6 home runs total against like left-handed pitching, and like over 30 something against right-handed.
Here's the thing that really gets me, okay, is that I understand you could lose power, right? I understand that, maybe your average could suffer because you see the ball differently as a left-handed hitter versus a right-handed pitcher as opposed to a left-handed pitcher. I get that. What's crazy to me is that he loses the ability to take the right pitches and identify balls and strikes. His on-base percentage drops 40 points versus left-handed pitching, while his average stays basically the same. He loses his power and his ability to get on base. So it's affecting his ability to identify a ball and a strike and be effective inside of the box, just because of the side of the arm that is coming at him. When he's got a left-handed pitcher, he is losing the ball. So now if I'm a hitting coach, I have to start asking the question, maybe we need to change his stance a little bit. Maybe we need to change where he stands in the box a little bit. Maybe we got to fix something because he's not seeing the ball the same way, in the right way. Because it's not that when he does make contact, when he does see the ball, his average stays exactly the same. So there's something, that's also something you wonder, is it fixable? Because that is so stark to me that his average is basically the same average. Righty and lefties. But when it's a left-handed pitcher, he can't identify the balls and strikes the same way.
Yeah, and they started at the beginning of the season. I know he had that more wide open stance and was working on that, and it seemed to kind of work itself out in April and May. And I don't know if he has kind of like abandoned that or lost that, because I mean he pretty much, he looks back to reverting back to his old approach at the plate. So I don't know if that's something that was completely abandoned at some point in time. But yeah, and that's like something that's weird to me, because I understand that like Major League Baseball and minor league baseball is different, but usually you can identify this stuff like earlier on in their career. And it's not something that he struggled with in the minors. It's something that's come, as he's been brought up to the major leagues. I mean, pretty much straight from AA, was sent back to AAA a little bit last year, but not something that really seemed to be a problem. But obviously, Major League Baseball.
What if it's the ballpark? What if it's the ballpark? I'm gonna float a crazy theory to you. What if it's the ballpark? If I look at his home and away splits, I also see that he has a harder time identifying balls and strikes, getting on base when he's at home than when he's away. Is it possible with a left-handed pitcher and the way that he has to pick up the ball on the other side of the pitcher's body when he's standing there, that he's just not seeing the ball when he's in his home ballpark? Am I getting crazy with the stats here? Because it's really strange. You look at him when he is facing a left-handed pitcher, and you look at him when he is on the road and home, and you see these differences, but they're very stark when you look at his splits this year. I mean, it's almost like you need to have a coach go stand there, Go look at where the ball comes out. Let me look over your shoulder and see what you're seeing. Why aren't you picking that up? There's something there, man. There's something there. I'm not giving up on him yet. And if at worst he's a platoon player, cool. Then, like I said, he's your 7, 8, or 9 hitter. And he plays only, and trust me, there's more right-handed pitchers than left-handed pitchers, so he's valuable. And you're still going to keep him around. You just have to figure out what you're going to do in those other situations, and you don't build around him. He's not a build-around player. He's a piece. But I wonder. Like, now I'm just trying to figure out why he can't do it.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's...
Because you say that. You say he gets up to the majors and he has a bigger problem. Well, okay, well, then, is he having a problem? Like, I mean, I know I sound like a crackpot, and I haven't started drinking yet, right? But like, think about this. If the only thing that changes between a left-handed pitcher facing him and a right-handed pitcher facing him is he's a left-handed batter, is his on-base percentage showing that he has a hard time identifying balls and strikes. And then when you look at his home road splits, you see such a difference in that stat as well, home and away. Is there something in the batter's eye for poor Jack Suwinski? Like, it just doesn't line up right. Do we need to build something on the wall? Is there a fan out there that's dressed like a chicken? Like, what is it? That's what I want to know.
I mean, it's got to be something, man, because like I said, you're throwing these things out here and it's just like, that's so true. Like,
I'm going down the rabbit hole on Jack Suwinski right now on this show.
Yeah,
because it's really weird. If you look at the numbers, Craig, I can see your eyes. Like, you're looking at your screen too, and you're going, holy cow, where did this come from? Has anybody else noticed this? Should I write a letter to Ben Cherington? Dear Ben, my name's Craig. I do a podcast, Bucs in the Basement. My crazy co-host found these anomalies. Is it possible there's something going on there? Signed, Craig. P.S. Can I get some tickets?
Yeah, you're like, Travis Williams built this new bar out there, and there's a person that sits there every single game, or the bartender has a shirt that he can't pick it up out of. I have no idea.
Yeah. Don't let anybody wear white in this section because the ball gets lost there. There's something. There's something.
Yeah, because the kid's 25 years old, and I don't think he might not be an answer at this point in time, but I also don't think that it's gone as far as, some people have said, we need an all-new center fielder because he's not any part of a piece. I feel like people get to the point in these rebuilds where they think that, like, once somebody has a little bit of success, that they're just like, well, they have to be a complete piece. They have to be, like that every single player that comes up has to be like at or near like all-star level caliber.
Well, how about this? We could just spend money to fix the problem. We'll spend money. We'll have Cody Bellinger come in. He could play first base and center field. So if Suwinski works it out, or if he doesn't, we'll just bring in Cody Bellinger. Sign the checks, Bob.
Yeah.
Get the checkbook out.
I mean,
we'll fix we can fix these problems with money really easy with your tiny little payroll. And be competitive for years. Let's go. Sign the checks. Let's go. I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
We sat through this long enough. Sign the checks. There's a solution to everything. I am not opposed. I'm telling you right now, if Ben Cherington came out in the offseason and traded for somebody or made a signing and it was a brand new center fielder and that was it, the Jack Suwinski experiment was over, and at best he was a fourth outfielder on this team, I would not get upset one bit, because any progress to get better is fine with me. Because in the end, Craig, you know how I measure a team? Is this player at this position good enough to play this position for the Dodgers? Is this guy good enough to play this position for the Braves? Is this guy good enough to be a Yankee, was what my dad used to always say when I was little. We'd be watching the team and he'd be like, I don't know. Is that guy good enough to be a Yankee? And when you compare that to the big team at the time, right? I don't know what you feel about the Yankees now, but I mean, when you compare that, you sit there and go, yeah, he could be a Yankee. Yeah, he could fit on that. Or you sit there and say, no, he can't. Jack Suwinski can't be that. He wouldn't even make the Dodgers, right? So, I mean, but there's other guys right now that are in this plan that I don't know if they would make a championship team. At some point, you're going to have to start being that cruel in your evaluation of players. So, no, I have no problem with somebody saying maybe this guy isn't going to work out. But again, it all comes down to how much money are they going to spend and how creative can Ben Cherington be in terms of acquiring players through trades. And how is he going to shape the team right now? There is a value to Jack Suwinski. He can still be a platoon player on your team. they may figure out what's going on with it when he's facing left-handed batters. Okay. But they're also, if the solution is moving on from him too, and they bring in a player that's better, how can I be upset about that?
Yeah, and I wouldn't be upset about, if it's a, clear improvement over what you have right now. And the other piece of that is, I mean, we talked about Ben Cherington before. Like it seems like that he's like trying to build, like he has like a war board or something with like sticky notes on it, and he's just like, we know Jack Suwinski can give us 2 wins, and Brian Reynolds should be able to give us 4 wins, and Brian Hayes should be able to give us, and where you have to like kind of build those other wins from. But if you could take, the Jack Suwinski sticky note out and put some money towards it, or trade for a player or whatever it may be, and you can replace that with, double the amount of, wins above replacement. Yeah, I have no problem with that. I just don't see, I don't know. I don't want to be completely, I don't know, heartless with this. But I guess you kind of must have to be.
No, I want to be heartless. I want to be, see, that's the difference with you and me. And I think we're going to see that here as this show continues to evolve with a team that's evolving. We started this thing, back in 2019?
Yeah.
And we've been going through, we've seen a regime change. We've seen the build. We've heard the promises. I mean, as far back as when Cherington first got his job right here on this show, what did I say? I don't know if he's going to be good or bad at his job. I have absolutely no idea if he's going to be good or bad at his job. He's got to change the structure. He's got to decide how he's going to compete. He's got to decide how he's going to work with the budget that his owner gave him. He may already know that Bob Nutting's not going to write any checks. He may have walked in and said, Bob, we got to go out and buy some pitching. We got to go get a first baseman. I'd like to address the center field problem because it would be a lot easier. And in a couple of years, we might need to fix this as well. And Bob may have laughed in his face. Maybe like, ha, 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 as he was lighting cigars with $100 bills. You have absolutely no idea how the conversation went. If he knows that, then he's got to operate a different way. Okay? Cherington and Nutting are 2 different people to me because one of them has all the money and the responsibility to spend the money. Cherington has the responsibility to understand who his boss is and operate within the system that he has. But throughout this entire process, I've said I want my general manager to be a heartless general manager. I don't want him to be friends with any of the players on his roster. I don't want him to even know a guy until somebody comes to him and says, this guy belongs on the 40-man, and then he's just a name on a board. I want him to look at these people and say, is this guy good enough to win me a title? And if not, he's out of town because I'm replacing him with somebody else. I'm heartless as a general manager. Okay? No attachments. No, none of this stuff. I don't want to meet your kids. I don't want to know your family. I don't want to know about your Aunt May or your Uncle Bob. I don't want to know about any of it, Craig. I just want to win, baby. That's all I want. Otherwise, you're gone.
Okay, I gotta be more heartless.
You're too nice.
I am.
You're a sweetheart. Too sweet. Heartless.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say